because the younger you are, the more risk you can take, right? You have less to lose, right? 18 years old, you don't have a family, you don't have like a mortgage, right? You have less to lose and you can take more risk. Because if you fail, then, you can just go back home. Like, when I failed at Google, I went back home, right? But then that opened up a new door, a new opportunity.
Welcome to a new episode of the DefDevice podcast. My name is Dana Falk, and today I have Gary Huang with me, who is the founder of the 7-figure seller Japan Mastermind. Hey ho, welcome Jerry. Jerry, how? Gary, right?
Yes, you got it, Dano. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, we go a long way back, man. I remember the times when we're having a weekly or monthly Skype call with our friend from Bali. That's when we were mostly active as Amazon sellers, both of us, like the three of us.
Yeah, we had a little mastermind going.
Correct. We had a little mastermind going, yeah. And then what happened? I mean, I sold my Amazon business. That's one. You are still selling, or?
I'm still selling. I'm selling in Japan now, but I'm running the 7-figure seller Japan Mastermind, which is an in-person conference teaching people how to sell in Japan, and doing some other stuff as well. But and I became a father, and life changed in COVID, and we moved from Shanghai to Tokyo. I mean, to Okinawa, then Tokyo. It's a long story. I'm sure we'll get into it, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. I mean, this is what this is all about. This is about your life story. But first of all, let us know more about your 7-figure seller summit thing. I mean, it's about selling in Japan, and I think your next event is coming up in April. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So Japan, Amazon Japan is kind of like the Amazon niche, right? I mean, people say the riches are in the niches, right? So you have to find a very niche product to succeed because it's so saturated and competitive in Amazon US and Europe. But Japan's the 4th biggest Amazon market, and I found out something like a yoga mat, the bestseller in the US has 4.6 stars and 72,000 reviews, but in Japan it only has 3.9 stars and 373 reviews. So the competition is a lot lower, and if you're already selling in US and EU, there's certain advantages you have that you can implement and sell into Japan, and you don't even need to speak Japanese to sell in Japan. I'm selling in Japan. I don't really speak Japanese. But yeah, that's just, I feel like Amazon Japan is the niche right now in 2024.
And this is what we have in common, because the pitch that you just made for Amazon Japan, this is normally my pitch, because one of our services is actually to help sellers, brands to start selling on Amazon Japan. And when I say Amazon Japan is the 4th biggest marketplace, normally eyes go really big because nobody can believe it. And yeah, I completely agree. It's a big opportunity. It's much underestimated. And I mean, our agency side is to help brands to enter the market, but you are doing something on a much bigger scale. You're actually organizing a summit in Japan, and where you're inviting international sellers and local business providers to meet and to cooperate and to
basically we're giving you guys the roadmap how to sell on Amazon Japan. So we have 7-figure sellers selling Japan, and last year we had one Japanese seller. He's selling $40 million US per year only in Amazon Japan. He doesn't sell anywhere else. So he was sharing, what he's doing, and he owns 3 bestseller badges in 3 of the most competitive categories. So, and he's just stuff like that. We're really helping sellers, sell in Japan, because there's a lot of myths, and there's a lot of Japan's intimidating, right? I mean, the language and the culture and stuff like that. But there's ways that you can overcome those challenges. So that's where we're helping sellers do, for the ones that are very serious about Japan.
Yeah, and that's your main business right now, right? I mean, you're organizing these summits and these events, and you're also very active blogging and posting about this kind of stuff. So this is the core of your business right now. to organize events, to bring people to Japan, basically, and to create awareness about this topic. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, we have the Japan conference. We did it last year for the first time. It was the first ever Amazon event. So we do this once a year, and then we also do the online conference, the Seven Figure Seller Summit. So that will be in June. So that one is online, and that's for selling on, just really teaching people how to grow their business, scale their business on Amazon. Marketing, PPC, profitability is a big thing. AI was really big. It's still like, everything is going somehow related through AI right now. There's like a big shift, right? So really featuring, actual sellers, how they're doing that. So that's what we're doing in June as well. Yeah, those are the main parts.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's quite a journey. I mean, to go from selling on Amazon, and we will learn more about where you come from, to kind of make this the core of your business, to organize this kind of events. I find it quite amazing and very unique, and which kind of brings up the question in my head, which is not exactly unexpected. Let's go back to 10-year-old Gary and meet 10-year-old Gary and find out, like, what was he doing? What was he about?
10-year-old Gary was in Los Angeles, California, USA. I think it was I was a quiet kid. I was the quietest kid in school. I wouldn't talk unless the teacher called on me. So I think that built up my listening skills and my observation skills. And even as a child, I was really fascinated by Japanese culture. I mean, I never thought that someday I would live in Japan. Like, I really liked the video games, like Nintendo, and all the coolest video games, they were in Japan, before they came out in the US or other places. And some of the best ones, like the Final Fantasy series, they never were released in the US unless you couldn't play unless you had the Japanese system, right? So I had this fascination with Japan. And when I was a kid, I also like, origami. Do you know what that is? Origami?
Sure.
You know what that is, right? Like,
oh yeah,
it's paper folding, right? Like making the crane, but there's like so much more you can do. So when my mom went to work, like during the summer, I had a lot of time, and my mom went to work and my grandma was taking care of me at home. She gave me this origami book. I couldn't read the Japanese, or maybe it was Chinese. I don't even remember, but I would just study the pictures, and then I would just follow the steps one by one, just the pictures. Like, I couldn't read the text because it was in Japanese or Chinese at that time. And then when she came home, like, I made a whole zoo of little animals, like, the tiger and like the dolphin and all of these different animals. I was very fascinated by that. So I guess that's part of the thing. I guess I come full circle now. I'm living in Japan. My son's going to pre-kindergarten, and but I didn't come directly to Japan. I lived in Shanghai for about 11 years. I met my wife in Shanghai. I mean, she's from Shanghai. We got married. I was working in sourcing. But yeah, I guess that's a glimpse into 10-year-old Gary.
It feels like a glimpse only. Yeah. So, I mean, how did 10-year-old Gary, who lived in LA, start, moving around? I mean, what was your first ambition? I mean, if it comes to like leaving school and starting your working life, what was the first thing that you had in mind? What was your first goal?
When I was 10, or when I left school, like college?
Yeah, when it was about time to kind of make your first choice after leaving college. Yeah.
Growing up in LA, my parents are immigrants from China. Right? I was born in the US, but my parents and my grandma, they immigrated from Beijing in the late 70s. So I kind of grew up in a bicultural environment, because outside the house I only spoke English, but inside the house I only spoke Mandarin. So it's funny, I've been living abroad for so many years, but I didn't take, like, the first time I boarded an airplane wasn't until I was 17 years old. Right. I never even flew like to New York or, to Florida. Right. But the first flight I took was, I still remember, it was a 17-hour flight from Los Angeles to Beijing, China, because we were going to visit my uncles, my cousins, right? Because I still had extended family that I had never met. So I remember I was 17. I had just graduated from high school, like, before I started college. And I went with my mom, and it was very eye-opening to me, because when I landed, I remember it was summertime. It was so humid. And then I was like so anxious on the plane. I was like, you can't imagine. I mean, the flight was slower than it is now. It was 17 hours. And that was my first flight. And then when I got there, it was like so muggy. It's hard to breathe. But when I heard the people talking, there was almost like this sense of familiarity, because it was like the Chinese that we spoke at home, except like everybody was speaking like this. I mean, I wasn't by any means fluent, but it's like there was a sense of familiarity, and it was very eye-opening, because China back then, it was kind of like the Wild West, right? I mean, you would like bargain, and like, I remember beer was cheaper than water, and it was really like the Wild West. I mean, now China's very different, and I think it was free and loose before. Now it's a lot different. That's a whole another topic. But it really opened my eyes. I kind of had like a curiosity that sparked from that trip. And then going to university, I went to university in Los Angeles, very close to home. My mom was very protective of me as an only child, and like, she wanted me to stay close to home. So I went to USC, which is a great school, University of Southern California, but it really I didn't get the independence that I wanted. So I guess to do that, I decided to do study abroad. So I felt that connection with China, and then I wasn't by any means fluent. So I actually switched my major from biology to Chinese, because I really wanted to. I felt like there was something there, and I felt there was a sense of excitement. And LA is a cool city, but I was bored of LA because I was, born and raised there, went there for school all my life. And then I really wanted to, go over there for like sense of adventure. So yeah, I guess that's the first turning point. Like, I did study abroad over there in Beijing, and, had many friends from Japan, Hong Kong, Chinese, met other Americans, like, from the Midwest, from East Coast that I never met in LA. So it was very eye-opening for me. Yeah, I guess that was one like shift or turning point.
All right. Yeah, that's very understandable. And then you went from studying Chinese to becoming an Amazon seller. How did that happen?
So when I did study abroad, remember, I met many friends from all over, right? So after graduation, I really wanted to work in China, because I felt like, if I worked in the US, it's great, but I feel like I'm only using part of my skill set, right? I'm not using my Chinese. I just really love to like be able to like negotiate, and I feel like, from that shy 10-year-old kid, I needed to reinvent myself. I did, like, in LA, I just felt like I'm still kind of like pigeonholed. And then I remember when I was in China, in Beijing University, and I told like my friends, oh, I'm actually like a shy person. They're like, what are you talking about? You're shy? Come on. Because I was like, my Chinese was probably like one of the best in the program. So every time we went to dinner, I would be the person that ordered all the dishes. And, I would like, when we went out, I would like negotiate with like the street vendor for that t-shirt. And then I just felt like it was almost liberating to me. And then I just felt like this is a really cool place, right? So after graduation, I decided to continue in China. After college graduation, I did a 1-year graduate studies program in Nanjing, China, at the Johns Hopkins Nanjing Center. So this was in 2002, 2003. Okay, this was over 20 years ago. And then the program got cut short because of another disease, not COVID. It was called SARS. So I don't know. It was an avian bird flu virus. And then they canceled the program. And then there was like a small jolt to the economy. Companies weren't really hiring. But anyways, long story short, one of my friends from the study abroad program, she got a job offer at Google in Mountain View, California, the Silicon Valley Bay Area. And then, so after graduation, I just kept in touch. And then she said, "Hey, Gary, why don't you come up to Mountain View?" And, or before that, she said, "Hey, send me your resume. Google is hiring. Maybe they have something for you." Right. And I'm like, okay. So I sent my resume, and then they flew me up for a job interview. And then I didn't get a full-time job, but I did get a contract, like a temp position in their online advertising AdWords department. So I think people know like Google AdWords. I mean, that's their bread and butter. I mean, it's like multi-billion-dollar, but I was working there. This was in pre-IPO Google in 2004. This was 20 years ago. My job was to review all of those AdWords ads, like those 3 lines, right? For like editorial, hate speech, porn, there were adult ads. So, you had to make sure to label anything that was like sexual into porn. And back then it was kind of like the Wild West online. There was, online poker was legal still. And then there was like, nani juice, Tahitian nani juice, health supplements. So it really opened my eyes. But another turning point was at the end, I was let go. I did not get the job offer. If I got that job offer, I would definitely be a millionaire by now with the stock options, right? I probably wouldn't even be having this conversation with you guys, right? I probably wouldn't be selling on Amazon, but anyways, I was really devastated from that because I really didn't get that job. I remember, my grandma was very old and, she was kind of like had dementia. And then my mom, she was very proud. And, my aunt was very proud that I got that, at least that temp position, right? But I didn't get the full-time offer. And it was like one of my biggest setbacks in my life, actually, because I was really depressed and sad. And I moved back down home. My parents got divorced as well. I wanted to go back to China, but for a career, but I just felt like I needed to be with family in 2004 because of the turning points. So the first product I sold online was in 2005. After I didn't get the job in Google, I saw that there was this opportunity. I'm like, hey, these people are spending all this money on Google, selling stuff online, like e-commerce businesses, right? There's probably something here. And back then, eBay was the biggest online e-commerce market. They were like Amazon today, right? This was 20 years ago. So the first product, so I started doing arbitrage. So I would go to, I was starting on eBay. So I would drive around to like estate sales. Like, do you know what that is? Estate sales?
No.
Okay. So it's a fancy way of saying when someone dies, right? The family wants to get rid of all their stuff. So they're doing a big sale. It's like a garage sale. Okay.
Yeah, we call it garage sale.
I would go on Craigslist. Yeah, I would go on Craigslist Saturday morning. And then I would drive around to all the rich neighborhoods like Beverly Hills. And I would pick up all the good stuff for really cheap. So that's how I got started selling stuff on eBay.
There you go.
Yeah.
On eBay.
And then
there's another thing we have in common, dude. Yeah, I also was selling on eBay, I think in 2005 or something.
Yeah.
Or even before that. Yeah.
Were you in Germany or where were you?
Yeah, in Germany, yeah. All right.
So then from that, I studied eBay and I built my own private label brand on eBay selling women's shoes. So my mom had a friend that was a Chinese importer. So he imported women's shoes. So I didn't have to import directly. I just bought the shoes from our friend Tony. So I would call him Uncle Tony. And then he had these they weren't like nice fancy shoes. They were kind of like tacky, like Mary Jane type shoes. And they catered to like rockabilly, like really like niche type audience. So I was selling shoes, and the profit margin was good, but the sizing and the returns were a nightmare, because if it was like half size too big or too small, it was coming back. So back then I did all of the pick and pack. I did all of the zebra thermal printing myself. I would drive to my post office every day. I did that for like almost a year, I think. This was in 2005. Well, actually, no, I did that for several years, from 2005 to 2008. I would go to eBay conferences in Las Vegas, kind of like, the Amazon conferences they have today. I would study, I would buy like eBay for dummies, and I was an eBay power seller. I had like that badge. Yeah, that's how I got started on e-commerce. This was 2005. 2005. Yeah.
Interesting. Lamp drop. Second time today, dude.
Yeah. I don't have my pro setup. I mean, I had a very professional setup in Okinawa when we had a nice rental house, but Tokyo is, yeah. I'm not in my office today, but anyways, yeah.
All right, no problem. So you were a power seller on eBay. See, this is something I didn't know, man. eBay power seller. And then you became
a little badge too.
And then you became an Amazon power seller, or I mean, how did this migration from eBay to Amazon happen?
Yeah, so I was selling on eBay, but then I saw that there were other platforms, right? This was 2005, 2006, 2007, and up until 2008, the global financial crisis. So I had a Yahoo store. The Yahoo store is kind of like the Shopify of today. It was like this kind of like drag and drop type of, it's a little bit, what do you call it? Primitive compared to now, but that's how I had my own store. And then I also just started selling on Amazon. I remembered back then they didn't have FBA yet. This was 2000, up until 2008. So I got started selling on Amazon as well. But Amazon at that time was not nearly the size it is now. I mean, back then eBay was the king. But yeah, so I did that for a couple years, and then I just remember it was 2008, right? Beijing had their Olympics, so I would have the radio on as I was doing, the picking and the packing and all of like, my eBaying and stuff. And then they were talking about Beijing Olympics. They were talking about, the culture there, and they're talking about like, I'm like, I know that, I really want to explore that. And I had one really good friend of mine who also was he was in Shanghai. Like he lived in LA, his parents are in LA, he's Chinese American as well, and then he had a really nice job in Shanghai. He's like, Gary, why don't you just come to Shanghai, and then you can just stay with me, for temporarily, right, while you get settled in. And like, I know you're sick of LA, and I can tell you really want to try China. Why don't you just come with me, just come crash at my place, right? So so I remembered it was July 5th, 2008, and then I just bought a ticket, a one-way flight to Shanghai, no job in hand. I had that one really good friend, and then I just went to Shanghai for that summer, and then I ended up, thank God, I found a job through my university alumni network, USC, and it was in sourcing. One of the alumni, he's a lot older, like, but he was a super experienced, ex Johnson & Johnson managing director. He was Brazilian. I mean, he's Brazilian Chinese, so Western educated, and then he worked in China since the 80s. So he was like very experienced China hand. I learned so much from him, like all of the sourcing, like all the negotiations, all of like the tricks, the stuff like the guanxi and all that stuff. I have to thank him. He really showed me the ropes to China. I mean, I knew the language, but he taught me like the business side, right?
Mhm.
And like selling and, watching out like these guys playing tricks and, stuff like that. So from 2008, that's how I made the transition.
Mhm.
But so I at that time, I tried to continue the e-commerce business, but it was just too much because there was no FBA. I hired like a part-time high school student to come in 2 days a week to the LA, like the warehouse rental, like slash my mom's warehouse in LA. And I still had like a whole mess of shoes there. And she was like the high school kid, like she was helping me
Mhm.
like fulfill the orders and stuff. And
Mhm.
yeah, man. I couldn't sustain it, so I stopped the e-commerce business for a number of years, all the way up until 2015, and then that's when I heard about Amazon FBA, and I heard those podcasts like The Amazing Seller and like JungleScout. I'm like, hey, I know that, right? I used to do the eBay thing. I know how to do that. I'm on the ground in China. I know how to do the sourcing. I mean, by then I visited hundreds of Chinese factories. I would go to trade shows and I would fly to Hong Kong. Shanghai had trade show every other week, and I put two and two together. So I started selling on Amazon FBA about 2015, and I
Mhm.
remember the first Amazon product that I got back into was Apple Watch bands. So at that time, Apple Watch had just launched. And, we talked about this. I think we talked about this, right? Like
Yeah,
Apple
yeah,
Watch
yeah,
bands. I
I
Yeah, I
cannot
had a
believe it.
business partner at that time.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then we built a six-figure business. I mean, just in I think like 6 months, right? It was like a really big opportunity. Yeah, so that's how I got started on Amazon
Yeah.
FBA about
Mhm.
2015. Yeah, and at that
Mhm.
time it was really the Wild West, and you can do giveaways and the reviews, and I was like throwing up like anything, man. I was doing like posture braces, I did sleeping bags, I did so many different products, man. It was really crazy. And yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Wow. Yeah, yeah, I think this is when we were kind of buddies without knowing each other, when we were both selling on Amazon
yeah.
private label, and I was also selling Apple Watch accessories, and I started right, at the 2014 when the Apple Watch came out.
Yes, exactly.
So it
Same.
was for my choice of
Hey,
products,
are you gonna do
Apple Watch.
something with the Apple the glasses? I just thought of that tonight, like during dinner. Some like the new Apple, like the
Yeah,
glasses, the
yeah,
VR
I
glasses, accessories, man. Maybe we should do something together.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I will be very open to collaborate. I mean, the glasses, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
that's like a high-end product sold by Apple. I mean,
It is. It
that's
is. Yeah.
they have announced it at their conference, I think, a few months ago, and I think they only start
Yeah.
selling now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm always open to new ideas. We
Yeah.
should have a chat about that. And then so you were in Shanghai, you knew all the factories, you spoke Mandarin, you were in China. I mean, of course, that's a huge advantage. I mean, this is one of the things that I tell people who ask me like what to sell or how to start selling. I mean, if you have like an advantage like this, that's huge.
Yeah.
You are have direct connections to manufacturers. I think that's one of the big things to have like on in the game. Um,
Yeah.
but then today you are in Japan and you are doing these masterminds. So there's another gap that we have to bridge, dude. So
Yeah.
you were an Amazon
So
seller, and what happened then?
2018. Okay, so I was an Amazon seller. I got married as well. So I got married to my wife um, in Shanghai, and then we had our son in 2018. So my son was born November 13th, 2018, and leading up to his birth, I previously I would fly to attend conferences like Amazon conferences, like Global Sources Summit in Hong Kong. I think that event,
Mhm.
right? And I also started 80/20 sourcing, 80/20
Yeah.
sourcing, which is still around. Um, I I created that website to help e-commerce sellers and Amazon sources save time and money sourcing from China, because it started as a blog, just blogging about you know the tricks that suppliers will play on you, like all that. The sourcing was like a black box, So I was one of the earlier people to kind of create that content online. I mean, it's very readily available now, but back then, like not everyone knew Alibaba. And I created YouTube videos. I collaborated with JungleScout, you know, on the $1 million case study, and I think there were like 400,000 views on that. I think we helped a lot of people get started. And I remember, like, I would introduce the concept of guanxi, you know, in China, because guanxi is the concept of, you know, building connections, building relationships to build better business. So I don't want to say I'm the person that, you know, taught that to the rest of the world, but I think, you know, a lot of people learned from the content that I produce. And you know, my mission, you know, right now is to help sellers grow their business, scale their business, and exit their e-commerce business. So I created 80/20 sourcing as a blog to help sellers to do that. Okay. And then I was invited to speak as a result at a number of conferences, including Global Sources Summit. So going back to that turning point in 2018, my wife was expecting and I couldn't fly to that conference anymore, right? So rather than being left behind, I thought, hey, why not invite these 7-figure sellers to teach me online what they're doing and to teach everybody else online? So that was the genesis of 7-Figure Seller Summit. It started in 2018. It was really designed to learn from 7-figure sellers how they're doing it so you can do it too. So that was the first online conference that we created. That was in 2018. And then after that, it started getting bigger and bigger. We would get like, you know, 1,500 people registering, 2,000 people registering. And then during the pandemic, we had like 3,000 people registering. And then we were voted the favorite Amazon conference in the world 2 years in a row. We were featured in Forbes. And yeah, it was, yeah, because at that time, everybody was locked down, right? And then me being a seller, you know, I curate all of the speakers. I put together all of the topics because I you know, by that time I was selling for many years, and you know, through 80/20 sourcing, I had like a whole community email list. So I really, you know, I was like the voice of the audience basically. I know what the right questions to ask. That's what makes our event different from those other events, because those other events may be good events, but the actual, like the people, they may not be sellers, or, you know, and, you know, I try to have like, you know, I do things the right way, right? Like I, you know, there's like black hat, there's like other ways, but I don't feel that's the right way to do business. And if you want to exit your business, if you have like black hat tactics, that's the biggest turn off to a potential buyer, right? So yeah, so that's what makes us different from other events out there.
Yeah, and you started definitely as an online event, right?
Yeah, so we started purely online because I couldn't fly to the event. Remember, my wife was expecting.
Right?
So I
Exactly.
couldn't fly to Hong Kong anymore. So we started online. We put together 9 online events throughout the years. 7-Figure Seller Summit.
But now you are in Japan. So how did that happen?
Okay, so my son was, and for the first 6 months we were in Shanghai. And then after that, it was, we're just trying to decide, where do we want to raise our kid, right? Do we want to raise our kid in China or the US, or, you know, where I'm from originally, or somewhere else, right? Because, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about that. We can talk a whole another hour about parenting, right? But basically, my wife and I, we always liked visiting Japan. I mean, from the culture to the food to like the cool like hot spring hotels, and you know, so we would literally, like, before we became parents, we would fly to just come to Japan from Shanghai. I mean, it was a quick flight, just on a holiday, like twice a year, right? And I think our dream was to at least live part of the year in Japan, because we really like the, you know, everything here, right? So I still remember it was getting very cold in Shanghai in 2019. Okay, at that time we didn't plan on moving yet, but we wanted to go on a holiday to somewhere warm. It was November of 2019. It was after US Thanksgiving. I still remember. This was before COVID hit. Actually, I think COVID just started in Wuhan around that time, but nobody knew it, or at least the government didn't tell people. Yeah. So we decided to fly to Thailand and then Vietnam for a holiday, somewhere warm, with our son, who was 1 year old at that time. So we ended up going to Bangkok and then Chiang Mai, and then after that, I remember it was the new year, and I actually met with some e-commerce friends. I met with Mike Jackness and his wife in Chiang Mai for the new year. I still remember. It was really good to meet up with him. He's a friend of mine. And then that's when COVID started to hit. And then we went to Vietnam. We went to Da Nang, which is a beachside town. I don't know if you've been before. Beautiful beach, very cheap, not that developed. At least this was in 19. But then, China got, with COVID, it started getting serious, right? So we were worried to go back. I remember we transited through Hong Kong. It was January. It was late January. It was my birthday. I still remember it was January 26, 2020. That was the day that Kobe had the helicopter crash and he died. That was on my birthday. And we were in Hong Kong and COVID was hitting China. I still remember that day. I was in the hotel gym working out, and then my wife said, they broke the bad news. Did you hear what happened to Kobe? Right. I still remember. And at that time, we were unsure. Where do we want to go next? Because we were transiting through Hong Kong because our Vietnam visas had expired. I had just done a summit in Da Nang. I think that was like maybe Summit 3 or something. And then we were like, where should we go? Right. We didn't want to fly long haul US because that was difficult with our son. And then we just looked at the map and we're like, okay, Okinawa, Japan. That's one of the shortest flights from Hong Kong because we didn't want to go back to China. And my wife already had a visa, and I can go to Japan visa free for 3 months. So we just flew to Okinawa from Hong Kong, and then I had never been to Okinawa. I really didn't know what to expect, but we were very fortunate that during COVID, the Japanese government had an exemption for any foreigners that had difficulty returning to their home country. They were allowed a temporary extension on their visas. So we were able to stay on a tourist visa in Japan from January 2020 all the way until October of 2022. We lived in Japan for 2.5 years in Okinawa. I couldn't go back to China because my residence permit had expired during COVID. And then to renew that, I could not do it at the Chinese embassy abroad. I physically had to be in China, but I could not go to China because China closed their borders. Even though my wife is Chinese, even though I worked there for over a decade, I paid all my taxes, I could not go back to China. Okay. And then we ended up, Okinawa, it's a blue zone, right? I think you know this, right? Like the people, it's like one of the longest lifespans for people in the world. And then very beautiful beaches, and there was zero tourists. So we were able to go to like any beach we want. We went to the world famous, like we took our son to the aquarium. Like I had like a season pass to the aquarium, to the zoo. The COVID cases were the highest in Japan because everybody wanted to get away and they couldn't leave Japan. So all the Japanese tourists went to Okinawa. But I think we were very fortunate to be able to stay there during that time. And I was able to run the online conferences from Okinawa. And it was, everybody wanted to do the Amazon thing because e-commerce was booming. E-commerce was like the silver lining of the cloud, right? During COVID. So we were very fortunate during that time. And my son actually, like, he took his first steps in Japan, his first words in Japan. And like, we never knew that, we would be in Japan, right? But I think, our dream kind of came true, Daniel, because we had that thought, hey, if we can live like part of the year in Japan, because we didn't think we could even get a long enough visa to, right? Like, normally you can only stay for 3 months, and now they have the new digital nomad visa, 6 months for foreigners from like 40 countries. But that's how we came to Japan.
Wow. Okay, now I understand. Because that part, I was always confused. Like, how come Gary from LA, who lived in Beijing, is now suddenly in Okinawa.
Shanghai,
But now,
lived in Shanghai. Yeah, it's
Shanghai,
complicated.
it's complicated, but I
Yeah.
think that's what most entrepreneurs have in common. So if you look at the backstory, it's always complicated. I don't think out of the 50 podcasts I've done so far, I think there's only like a handful of people who have actually grown up in one place and actually did their business at that same place where they grew up. So most of us have been like around for all different reasons. Yeah, that's fascinating to hear. And let's come to the conclusion of the wisdom that you have gained along your journey as an entrepreneur. What would you share today with 10-year-old Gary, or with maybe an 18-year-old entrepreneur who would like to start his own business?
If you're 10 years old, I would get started, somehow, right? Whether it's, when I was 10 years, I was working for my mom at her clothing company during the summer holidays. And I remember like she's a retired fashion designer. I would go into her workshop, and then I would like glue the little flowers on like women's hats, and like glue like the flowers on the women's shirts. And that's how I got started. And I made some money, right? And like my cousin and I, we would also like make bootleg CDs. We would burn those CDs for like sell to friends, right? We would download those bootleg things. I would say just get started. I mean, because the younger you are, the more risk you can take, right? You have less to lose, right? 18 years old, you don't have a family, you don't have like a mortgage, right? You have less to lose, and you can take more risk. Because if you fail, then you can just go back home. Like when I failed at Google, I went back home, right? But then that opened up a new door, a new opportunity, right? And then I don't think there's like, and the other thing now is like giving the world as it is, like we can't really plan like a 20-year plan, right? I think I can only plan like a 2-year plan now. I don't know where I'll be like 5 years from now, right? But I think we have to pivot, and then when we have the opportunity, we have to pivot, and we have to have faith as well. I mean, like whether you're you're religious, or you got to have faith, because I think certain things happen for a reason. And like so I think I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, that would be my parting words.
Yeah, thank you, man. Yeah, having faith is definitely, I mean, one way to put it, that we have to believe in something, we have to have some kind of confidence. Some people call it hope, or, just expecting something good to happen. Yeah, maybe this is, but faith is one way to put it, which I completely agree. It's an essence of, venturing into anything. We have to have faith that it could actually work.
Yeah. If I didn't have faith, I don't think we would have, I don't think we would have like be where we are today. Like even like last year, like the first Japan mastermind, like I don't even, to this day, I don't really speak Japanese, right? It's embarrassing, right? But I was able to organize a conference in Japan, in Tokyo, and we had like speakers from all over the world. And even Amazon attended our event, right? I mean, without the faith to just do what we did, like I don't think like I could have pulled it off, right? But for the next event, I mean, there's a whole new set of challenges, right? So you got to have faith, man. I mean, and entrepreneurial, and I guess the other thing, okay, the entrepreneurial journey is a roller coaster, right? I'm sure you guys have heard there's like the ups, the highs, and the lows, right? And even today, somebody hacked into our active campaign email marketing accounts. And then I wasn't able to send emails like since last week, and then we had to go back and forth with their, verification, and someone sent like this spam email to all of our people on our list. And even today, I'm still working on this, right? I mean, it's just, this stuff is gonna happen, right? But I feel like if you're doing the right thing, the journey, it's it's not easy. You're gonna get the target on your back, right? Whether you say, it's like, spiritual warfare, or however you want to put it. I just feel like we just have to have faith, right? We can't give up. Yeah, I'm still in the middle of it. I'm not saying like I'm like this super successful business person. I'm just like everybody else out there, right? We're still, in the middle of the journey. We haven't finished the journey yet. So I'm just happy to at least share some of my experiences today. So, thank you, Dana, for that.
Thank you for sharing, Gary. Thank you so much. I appreciate. I learned a lot today. How Gary became who he is today. So that was very insightful. And I'm sure our audience has also had a lot of good takeaways. Thank you so much for spending the time with me here. And we'll stay in touch, man.
Excellent. Thanks again, Dano. And thanks everybody for listening. And if you do want to sell in Japan, highly recommend you check out the 7-Figure Seller Japan Mastermind, April 8th to the 10th in Okinawa. And I think, besides the event, Okinawa is a beautiful place for people to check out. I kind of wanted to give back to Okinawa as well, because Okinawa really accepted us when other places turned us away during the pandemic. And actually, Okinawa is actually the poorest prefecture in Japan. Like, the per capita income is the lowest. So they really struggled during pandemic. So I'm just trying to, at least also give back to that community as well.
That is very noble of you. Thank you, Gary.